Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Sweet Nothings podcast. This is your new home of relaxed, funny, and informative chats all about the love of eating. Let me whisper sweet nothings in your ear about the latest food trends, controversial opinions, and all things edible. In case we haven't met yet, my name is Kelly. I am the writer, photographer, videographer, creator, nonsense maker, and hamster wheel runner behind Maverick Baking, which you can find obviously at maverickbaking.com, here on YouTube, and on just about every other social media platform. Basically, in this podcast, I want to talk about the culinary world, my love for it, whether it's, restaurants, home cooking, and just the joy of eating. I want to, in upcoming episodes, discuss food news, discuss food trends, anything that's really going on in the chaotic world of eating. Most of the time, it will just be my voice you hear, so apologies in advance for that. But I am hoping that, if this is kind of nicely received, then we will also be able to get some guests. I'll get some of my foodie friends on, maybe some chefs, maybe some experts to talk about the wonderful thing that is food. But I kind of wanted to start this first episode on something that is perhaps relatable to us all. The main thing I want to discuss a bit later on are some ingredients that we truly cannot live without. But before that, I want to touch on the food trends and some of the food news that's been going on this month of March 2021, because as we know, the world is in utter chaos, and usually when that happens, the world of food isn't too far behind it, or it's causing it. So the main kind of trend that I've really been seeing this month, or at least the first one that kind of came to my mind, and apologies for anyone who isn't a TikTok user, or at least not a kind of active TikTok user just yet, but TikTok is quickly becoming, in my opinion though, do let me know if you disagree. TikTok appears to be becoming the new home of kind of food hacks, food trends, food porn, if you will. While Instagram had always had that title, with YouTube taking it now and again, TikTok really seems to be the place that these things are born now, because it's where I believe it's probably one of the most widely used social media platforms. It was, I read somewhere, the most downloaded app of 2020, so it's kind of unsurprising that that's the case. But a big kind of trend that's appeared this month, thanks to TikTok, is some resurgence of oats. Now, oats had kind of previously been, before anything, it was mostly just Scottish people eating them with water and salt. And, we eventually graduated to milk. But oats kind of within the past 10 years have had a reputation of being a little bit gentrified, as ridiculous as that sounds. The health gurus have been all over it. The kind of militant vegans have been all over it, which I am all for. Oats are my country's native grain. But they've been having this kind of weird popularity surge on TikTok over the past few weeks, but in the form of baked oats. Now, if you're rolling your eyes at the thought of someone baking a tray full of porridge, to be honest, I don't blame you. But essentially, these baked oats have been showing up thanks to various kind of recipe people on TikTok, as well as people who have now dedicated entire TikTok accounts to their morning oats. And you have to appreciate the dedication. Like, the following on some of these accounts is unreal. And I have a huge amount of admiration for it. But essentially, people are mixing oats together with a few other ingredients, baking them and turning them into this kind of dessert for breakfast idea. Now, the idea isn't totally new. It's, as I said, porridge itself is, as old as time. But this kind of baked oats trend was a bit of a thing about 6 or 7 years ago. And of course, just to provide a shameless plug, if you do need a recipe for some baked oats while you're here, if you think it sounds good, I unbelievably, back in August 2014, when I was merely a child, posted a few variations of baked oats under the title of Baked Porridge for One. So if you do ever feel the need to go and look at that, it is available at maverickbaking.com, as all your other recipe needs are. Similarly, I also have a recipe on my YouTube channel for baked porridge cups, which was another bit of a trend that appeared very briefly in the depths of the sort of wellness trend that was a big thing kind of 5 to 6 years ago now. And, you know, I do get it. These oats, they're delicious, they're filling, but the thing that does kind of confuse me is that they really aren't that quick to make. So it has been interesting watching them become popular in the same part of the year as that kind of ridiculous feta pasta. You know, I'm sure that hasn't escaped anyone's gaze. It was showing up all over the place. But what makes it interesting is the fact that the baked oats is quite a slow recipe compared to what food hacks usually are, which is this absolutely mental, you know, hyper fast, sort of over-exaggeratedly quick recipes or food hacks to make your life easier, supposedly. Baked oats are quite the opposite, so it is quite interesting. But people have been making them into great flavors, obviously, them being dessert themed. We've had things like chocolate lava cake oats and ones with loads of toppings and stuff like that. When you now search for baked oats online, you will find so many images, so many videos, so many recipes. So it really has kind of taken off. The other major food trend, now this one's been a little bit more controversial, is the viral TikTok recipe for Nature's cereal. Now, this is every bit as ridiculous as you would expect it to be. So basically, I believe it all began with this guy, Nature's Food, who decided to post a TikTok of him pouring pomegranate seeds, blackberries, and blueberries into a bowl, covering it with coconut water and calling it Nature's cereal. Now, totally harmless. This guy probably didn't expect to get the views that he did. That video at the time of recording is sitting at 5.8 million views. And the wonderful Lizzo jumped on this trend and made it, and she's kind of given it an extra boost in popularity. And it's now led to, obviously, a blend of people memeing the hell out of it, or actually trying it and liking it. And it's managed to get its claws into all areas of the internet as expected. And I unlike the baked oats thing, I hate this. Like, I've already made a TikTok about it myself. I didn't kind of expect this trend to become a trend in itself. It does kind of baffle me, but people are liking it. People are hating it and people are liking it. I hate the fact people are calling it cereal. I understand it's delicious. Like, I love berries as much as the next bitch, but it's not even the season for most of these fruits, which is just extremely annoying. And secondly, it's not cereal. You know, if anything, call it a fruit salad, call it a soup, call it a deconstructed smoothie. But to call 3 kinds of fruit in a bowl covered with coconut water a bowl of cereal, again, the guy probably didn't even intend for it to happen. He probably just thought it was a cute, you know, thing for him to name his he probably just thought it was a cute way for him to name his breakfast, but it's become a thing. And I don't want it to be the thing that it is. But that has been the other kind of food trend that seems to be absolutely rocketing in popularity this month. But, you know, because we're on lockdown and we have nothing much better to do, a new trend is appearing every week. So I really don't think we'll ever run out of trash to comment on. We've already gotten over the Weetabix and beans part of the year. So I'm going to touch wood and say it can't get much worse than that, really. Moving on to some of the news this month. Now, the main one that was getting my goat was this thing that just kind of appeared out of nowhere at the start of the month, like right at the start of the month. I don't know if anyone would have kind of picked up on it because it started and stopped so quickly, but I'm talking about Recipesley. Recipesley. I'm not even entirely sure how to pronounce this, but essentially I logged onto Twitter one morning, just quite innocently, still tired, coffee not drunk. And I saw these food bloggers going kind of crazy on Twitter. Obviously, I follow a lot, being one myself, about this app that had been created called Recipesley. So this guy, either Tom Redman or Tom Redman, apologies if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, he had tweeted right at the end of February, some personal news. 2 friends and I created a new thing to fix online recipes. The language is triggering enough. Recipesley.com, your favourite recipes except without the ads or life stories, feedback and RTs appreciated. And he attached this little kind of picture of, I'm guessing, what the app or the website was supposed to look like. Basically providing a title, some pictures, and just the recipe. No other content within it. Now, as you can imagine, as all things on Twitter do, no matter whether it's right or wrong, Twitter divided in two, as always. So the idea of this app or website, whichever it was plotted to be, was to kind of collect all these internet recipes in one place. Imagine it almost like the kind of ASOS marketplace of recipes, but providing absolutely none of the traffic or profit to the actual creators. This was where the issue was coming up. So while there's kind of no issue with collating recipes and, having collections of things, Pinterest has been doing that for years. That was the whole basis of Pinterest, was to create these boards and to create these collections of things that you want to try or things that you like the look of, stuff like that. Even websites like Bloglovin have been a bit less controversial than this. Bloglovin is kind of a way for people to have all of their favorite bloggers followed on one platform. It's not hugely popular, but it allows people a way to read blogs kind of all in one go. Instead of jumping to all these different websites, you use Bloglovin. Now, while it doesn't bring the traffic or the profit from ad revenue that going straight to a website can, Bloglovin at least lets the blogger have the credit for the work they put into both the writing and the recipes or whatever it is that they're sharing. Recipesley just rubbed a few people up the wrong way, including myself. So hugely controversial. Obviously the trolls on Twitter were keen, and a lot of kind of regular people on Twitter were very keen for this. They like the idea of just having picture, recipe, bang, bang, bang. And it revived, of course, the whole joke about having to scroll through 600 pages of text when you have a food blog in front of you, which, might have been funny the first time we saw this tweet back in 2012. But nowadays, it just points to nothing but either ignorance or rudeness, in my personal opinion. Again, do let me know if you disagree with that. But essentially, while food blogs began in their early days of like 2009 to 2012, yes, they probably did include a lot of kind of what some people might call rambling about one's family and friends and that relationship to a recipe. That was the whole point. Food blogs began as blogs. They began as a way of people creating an online diary to document their life. And then eventually some people saw that it gained a lot more popularity and a lot more viewership when they tied in recipes to this. And that's how more and more people, including myself, jumped on and realized, oh my God, instead of just publishing this to social media, we can have a dedicated blog and website where we get to kind of embrace the love of writing as well as the passion for sharing recipes. So we did. And that, was absolutely fine. It was working great. But of course, while this has evolved with the times to become something that allows us to actually put more information about the recipe in the text before the recipe card itself appears, it helps with search engine optimization, it helps it look more professional, it helps everything be taken more seriously. And usually the reason that people start blogs in the first place, no matter the content, is because they like to write or they like to share images along with some writing. That was the whole point. And my own blog, for example, when you jump to Maverick Baking, while there might be a sentence or two of personal anecdotes regarding the tasting of a recipe involved in the text. It's mainly about the recipe. It's mainly either the tips or explaining why you do certain things, explaining the science behind things. And some people's blogs go into so much detail, it's ridiculous that it's free. And that's the main thing that was kind of grating on people about this new platform, especially the fact that in his kind of announcement tweet, this man, Tom Redman, had said that this app or website was going to fix online recipes. So, you know, those of us who spend the hours cooking, photographing, writing, editing, and publishing, and then maintaining both the cost and effort of a website, this guy was basically just going to sweep in and fix all of our hard work. So you can imagine why this ruffled a few feathers. But equally, it managed to ruffle so many feathers that when you go to recipesley.com now, you're met with an error message, which just says, "We're sorry, we have nothing but respect and admiration for the time, money, and effort that go into creating great recipes and websites. We don't want to minimize the results for all that hard work. We realise we're not demonstrating the huge respect that we have for recipe creators. We missed the mark big time today, and we're sorry. Given the feedback, we are taking Recipesley.com down as we re-examine our impact. We commit to making changes where we have fallen short." So, you know, obviously it is a bit of a bummer because I can see where this guy was coming from. It's probably a gap in the market that a lot of people would like to have filled. I can totally understand that. And he probably did get a lot more kind of dogpiling on Twitter than he was prepared for. And, you know, if there was a way for this website or app to work in a way which did kind of collate things and make it easier for people while also allowing the same traffic, credit, and eventually ad revenue to be earned by the creators, I think that would be fantastic. And I really hope that something like that could be created if it does, because this just missed the mark a bit. But I hope he manages to come back. I do feel for the guy a bit, even if it did ruffle my feathers. The other kind of news thing that, of course, flashed up is Cadbury's annual attempt to either shock us, horrify us, whatever it is. They're very, very good at once a year limited edition or revival of something. And this year, Cadbury's marketing shtick, rather than like last year and the year before with the white cream egg and stuff like that, they've decided to release a cream egg beer. So, as usual, Cadbury doing their thing of creating something semi-controversial but also relatively bland. They created this beer. And of course, I was interested. I like beer. I especially like dark, sweet stouts. And I like chocolate. So this was right up my alley for various reasons. It was a collaboration with the Goose Island Beer Company, who I will admit I haven't heard of before, but this has probably actually given them a much needed boost. I don't know what kind of relationship Cadbury have with this company, but I hope that if they are kind of a smaller, more independent company, that it's given them a nice bit of traffic. I think that's great if it has. So obviously it's a new idea, did interest me, mostly because it's their first product in a while that isn't just an Oreo repackaged. But sadly, this was released a couple of times. They kind of released it a few different times, 2 or 3 times over the span of this month, and it has sold out immediately each time, and I have missed out. Otherwise, I would have brought you guys a review. I would have kept it to drink right now, or I would have produced a review video on YouTube. But the beer was an eclectic, their words, not mine, blend of malted barley, oats, wheat, and milk sugar, providing a deliciously rich and creamy texture with cacao nibs and vanilla beans that lift the creme and chocolatey notes to deliver a celebratory beer that is smooth, rich, and excellently balanced. Again, their words, not mine. So this was to celebrate the 50th birthday of a Cadbury cream egg, apparently. I didn't actually realise cream eggs were that old. And it does say that they're going to have new beers and more limited edition releases soon. So I might actually keep my eye on this website because we all like a craft beer. And when it has kind of tie-ins with chocolate companies, as controversial as the chocolate companies are, you know, it's something I'm quite interested in. Though to be honest, I can't really imagine how you could convey the exact flavour of a cream egg into beer, because mostly the flavour of a cream egg is just the fondant icing and the filling. But I think this was something that was quite interesting and definitely different for Cadbury. And that kind of sums it up for the interesting news and food trends that we've had so far this month. So obviously, if I have forgotten anything, do let me know via social media, or if you want to drop it down in the comments below if you are listening on an audiovisual platform like YouTube at the moment. I would love to know your thoughts on any of these, and I cannot wait to see how the rest of this chaotic year unfolds in the form of food trends, because we have already gotten through quite a lot. You're listening to the Sweet Nothings podcast. If you want more recipes, food reviews, and knowledge on all things edible, you can find it at maverickbaking.com and at Maverick Baking on YouTube. Now that we have kind of churned our way through the food trends and the food news of this month of March, I want to get into a bit of a topic I wanted to cover in this debut episode of the Sweet Nothings podcast, and that is ingredients that we cannot live without. Coronavirus, COVID-19, all of the restrictions that have come with this turbulent pandemic, it's forced us all to cook more because of the amount of time we've all spent indoors, or it's at least forced us to spend more time in our kitchens rummaging for things to snack on. Whether or not we're cooking more is yet to be answered. And I know that Deliveroo are probably rolling around in the profits they've made from the amount of takeaways people have been ordering from this year. But I wanted to talk about these ingredients because cooking is something that has become even more prevalent in my own life in the past year. You know, I have a 9-to-5 job, but it had meant, obviously, beforehand that I was out of the house for most of the day. And most days I would snack on something for breakfast, buy my lunch, and then cook something for dinner. Whereas these days, much like probably the vast majority of you very kindly listening at the moment, have been forced to kind of pay more attention to my meals and to cook for either just for myself or myself and my boyfriend, Francesco, every single day, like 3 to 4 times a day. And it has kind of forced me to take a bit more of a look at the stuff that's in the cupboard and really take note of the ingredients that I basically have on a constant cycle, or they're just never out of my hands. But first of all, I wanted to kind of poll you guys as to the ingredients that you cannot live without. And some people's answers were as expected, and some were a little bit more spicy. So I just want to talk through those just now and just kind of discuss our thoughts on them, why they are so valuable to us, and why we can't live without them. So I didn't really ask for as much of a reason, because obviously people don't need to share their life story with me on Instagram. But one of the first responses I got back was someone telling me they cannot live without cheese. Now, I fully understand this. I fully relate to it. They didn't even specify the kind of cheese, which is even better, to be honest. You know, and whether these ingredients are something that people always add to cooking or baking, sweet or savory, or it's just something that's so heavily relied upon in your everyday life that you can't imagine enjoying life as much without it. Cheese is definitely one of those things. I can fully understand this. Cheddar, Parmesan, and probably Crowdy, for anyone who isn't from Scotland or who isn't acquainted with Scottish cheeses, which is most people. Crowdy is essentially this kind of soft, granular cheese, somewhere between goat's cheese and ricotta in flavour and texture. I love it, and it's always on rotation in my fridge, alongside a strong cheddar and some Parmesan. I probably would admit to not being able to live without those as ingredients or as whole foods. A couple of people threw in vanilla, which was an interesting one for me. I'm guessing this is mostly for baking purposes, or maybe for any kind of dessert, or maybe even some breakfast purposes, to be honest. But it was interesting that this was quite a popular response. I think we're quite used to using vanilla in this part of the world. And I think in kind of the United States and in Canada as well, it's just something that we kind of instinctively add to everything. Especially if you're a baker, you'll find it in recipes when, even if it doesn't necessarily belong there, it's just something we kind of take for granted in a lot of recipes, in the same way that we do with eggs or butter. Vanilla just adds this extra note that seems so basic because it's a flavor you've been eating since you were a child, but also just something so perfectly balanced. So I totally understand this passion for vanilla. Another one that popped up a lot was people emphasizing their reliance on chocolate. Again, completely understandable, whether it's dark, whether it's milk, perhaps it's even white chocolate, whatever it is. It's so bloody versatile in any kind of baking. And I truly, truly believe that there isn't much on this planet by way of foodstuff that couldn't be improved by chocolate. And I mean that sweet and savory. If you want to challenge me on that, feel free. But I am quite firm in that belief. Any recipe I've ever made, I could probably add chocolate to it and be even happier. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't really care. So to the people who said that, I completely agree. Butter was another common appearance. That's just completely not even up for debate. Butter is utterly essential. Another that showed up was pasta. They didn't specify the shape. They didn't kind of specify the cooking method, but pasta was one that was there as well. I'm sure many, many people would agree with this. Pasta is something that, at least in this country, is very, very common, only become more common in, the past 20 or so years of my life. I've grown up eating it. I eat even more of it now that I live with an Italian, so complete respect for that. Someone just said seasoning, which was an interesting one for me because I don't know if they meant like a specific blend of seasoning or just salt and pepper, but obviously I would say that you're living a pretty bland life if you're living without seasoning. So I do agree. Someone came in and specified that black pepper was something that they couldn't live without. Again, I completely agree, though I do think sometimes it's something we weirdly rely upon alongside salt. Like, salt has a scientific place in food. There is nothing that tastes better without salt on it. And typically the better or bigger the flakes of salt, the better anything tastes, sweet, savory, whatever it is. Black pepper, though, I feel like in some countries, especially in British cooking, in American cooking, countries that aren't as acquainted with spice, I'll put it that way. We rely on black pepper as if it kind of has the same role as salt, but I don't really know why. Black pepper does have a specific flavor and it does add to a lot of things very, very well. But it seems to have become the crutch spice. Whereas there are probably other spices that could do just as good, if not a better job. So I'm not really sure where that comes from, but I would probably say that most people couldn't live without it. We get a little bit spicier. Someone came in with cinnamon being something they couldn't live without. Now, I used to put cinnamon on absolutely everything, like absolutely everything. Less so now. It's definitely not something I add to my baking or to my own personal meals quite as often as I used to. But when it hits about the last week of August to about, I'd probably say, the first week of February, it's going in just about everything sweet that I consume. I like to kind of keep it as more of a seasonal treat now, whether it's into coffee, into porridge, no matter what it's into. Cinnamon is great. It's fantastic. I probably could live without it, but it just goes so well when it's cold outside, especially in a cold country like mine. It's cold outside, you want something that's warm, and you want something that adds a bit of sweetness or sweet flavor without actually having to add sugar or syrup. It's just great. Bourbon whiskey was a very interesting one that someone else added to the replies. It seems oddly specific for me. Maybe they meant it because they're just, plunging into alcoholism, as many of us are in 2020 and 2021. But even more specifically than just whiskey, though. Like, they haven't specified whiskey. They didn't say Scotch whiskey. They said bourbon whiskey, which, I believe is like the specific Kentucky. I think it has to be from Kentucky or something like that. At least I believe I read that somewhere. And yeah, I mean, I have cooked with whiskey. Obviously, it's kind of in my blood, but I wouldn't say it's something I could live without. I don't care much for drinking it. I'll have it now and again, but the smell of like really peaty whiskey actually makes me feel pretty sick. So it's definitely not something I have in my kitchen a lot, and cooking with it might have to be something that I do a bit more looking into, because I think I've only ever added it to sauces or cakes. Aside from that, I would be interested to know what people do with it. Then we got perhaps the spiciest of the answers when someone said that cardamom and rosewater improve everything. Now, this one perhaps is extremely new to the British palate for most people. It's certainly not something we see every day. They are two flavors that I like in moderation. Cardamom is absolutely gorgeous in sweet and savory cooking. I'm a big fan of it, and it's used quite widely across the world. Like, I know that not only kind of very spice loving nations use it, you'll also see a lot of cardamom in Scandinavian baking, for example, which is something that always intrigued me. You know, cardamom buns and things like that, they just look delicious. Rosewater is something I can't quite as easily defend. It's something that to me tastes either like soap, like old lady's perfume, or like a drawer full of bras and knickers, to be honest. It's not a flavour I favour, but I have had it in some kind of Middle Eastern bakes and some Greek baking. I believe I've had some as well. So it has a place, obviously. It's just definitely an interesting one. And I would love to know how often that person was able to use it outside of kind of sweet foods. You know, does the rosewater apply as much in savoury cooking as much as cardamom could, for example? Love that answer though. And my favourite of all came when someone said that oxygen was an ingredient they couldn't live without, and absolutely no one could debate that. But of course, I also want to move on to the ingredients that personally I couldn't live without, just as a bit of a kind of quick fire chat through things that I literally can never leave alone. Worcestershire sauce, Lee and Perrins is is something I can quite confidently say I couldn't live without when it comes to savoury cooking. No matter what I'm making, I cannot physically prevent myself from shaking a few drops of that stuff into whatever it is I'm making. Soup, gravy, pasta sauces, mac and cheese, curry, anything. I know it doesn't belong there. I know that a traditional stir fry does not contain Worcestershire sauce, but mine does. I love it. It adds such a unique, salty, savoury, umami, dark deliciousness that I just can't leave it alone, to be honest. Another ingredient for me that is absolutely unparalleled is rosemary. Fresh or dried, this stuff, I cannot get enough of it. It is absolutely essential. It's my favourite herb. I put it on everything, on meat, on vegetables, any time of year, any dish. If you've got some rosemary lying around, I will use it. Chicken stock is another prime example of this. Now, I'm not getting all chefy here and saying that it has to be homemade. If it's homemade, fantastic. If it's a Knorr or Oxo chicken stock cube, I am just as passionate about it. Any recipe that's savoury, if you're obviously not vegetarian or vegan, any recipe that calls for water, replace it with stock. I'm telling you, it will improve your life so much, so much. Agreeing with a couple of other people, I wrote down chocolate and salted butter as ingredients I can't live without. Salted butter, I'm especially passionate about. I do not see the purpose of unsalted butter, and I will take that to my grave. Similarly, chocolate, whether it's white, milk, dark, cheap, expensive, craft, handmade, anything, chocolate will always have a place in my kitchen. And the final one I wanted to talk about is lemon. And I believe this is probably a common answer for cooks and chefs all over the place, but the things that lemon zest and lemon juice can do to the human taste buds and to food are just bloody wonderful, to be honest. So whether it's sweet, savoury, you want to add a little spritz of something here, a little bit of freshness, a little bit of zestiness, anything, a lemon will improve it. End of story. And all of this kind of discussion of ingredients and how versatile they are and things like that, it really, I find it quite interesting because that common theme is there in the versatility and that most of them could be used every single day or multiple times a day. And interestingly though, in the feedback from other people that I'd asked, from you lovely people, and even from my own choices. They all come from different flavor profiles and from different cultures. You know, they're not all something fatty. They're not all something spicy or sharp or sweet. They kind of cover every part of human taste, which I love because it shows you that people have this amazing versatility, even with their, you know, what you could call basic everyday ingredients. And something I wanted to touch upon just before we kind of start to round up the chat about ingredients we can't live without is I absolutely had to recommend The Flavor Thesaurus, which is a book by, I believe it's Nikki Segnit. This was released back in 2010, but it's one of the best books I think I have ever bought. I will drop the link if I can on whatever platform you're listening to this to, but otherwise do check out The Flavor Thesaurus. I have the book myself. It is always sitting on my shelf. And not only does it have an absolutely gorgeous cover, but it essentially talks you through pretty much every flavor you could think of. Every single one and what they pair with. It will tell you all of the things that lemon pairs well with, all of the things that coffee pairs well with, all of the things that chicken pairs well with. And it's not a big book, but it is so useful for inspiration, for meal ideas, even just for understanding the kind of different tastes when it comes to food. And they're also all kind of mapped out in this flavor wheel of meaty, of cheesy, of floral, fruity, things like that. It's fantastic. So I would definitely recommend that to anyone who is interested in ingredients in that way. But I believe that's kind of all I've got time for today. And, you know, without wishing to burden your eardrums with my voice for hours upon end, that has kind of covered everything I wanted to talk about today. So if you guys have enjoyed this little podcast, do let me know. You know, this is the first episode. You could call it a bit experimental. Obviously, if it only gets like 2 views or 2 downloads or 2 listens or less, because that is also a possibility, it might be something you don't see happening a lot, but I have as much time and passion to talk about food, other people's opinions and experiences with food. So it's something I really would like to keep going and to keep the discussion going around. So do let me know if you have enjoyed this little episode, if you like the format, if there's any specific topics you'd like to hear me cover, do let me know. I already have a little kind of list of all the things I'd like to talk about in future episodes, and I'm sure the news and the TikTok food trends will keep us going for content. There is no doubt about that. But do let me know if there's anything specific you'd like me to talk about or any questions you'd like me to answer. But I think for now, I am going to wrap up there. So thank you guys so much for listening. My name is Kelly. I am the woman behind Maverick Baking and now behind the Sweet Nothings podcast. It has been a delight to have you here. Don't forget to subscribe, to follow, whatever the terminology is on whatever platform you are consuming this media through. It would be lovely to see and hear from you again. Thank you so much, and I will see you for the next one.